Hello everyone and welcome to Keen Ear, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at my Thin Lizzy collection, which is not extensive or anything like that. Definitely don't have a complete collection, but it's like a work in progress, and I guess I'm going to be adding to it, in due time, picking up more and more as I go along. So maybe I might make a follow-up to this video, one day. And yeah, Thin Lizzy, definitely a group that I really like. They're maybe not one of my all-time favourites or anything like that, but they're definitely up there. And yeah, two things I like about them the most. First of all, you've got Phil's songwriting, which I think is great. I think he was a fantastic songwriter. And particularly with the early days, one of the things that I like is Eric Bell's guitar playing. I think that was just really great. I think he was something about his guitar playing that I particularly like. I think it's one of the highlights of the early days, the early period of Thin Lizzy when they were just starting out, pretty much, as growing in popularity and that sort of thing. So we'll start the collection off, which, as I've mentioned, is not extensive or anything like that. So I don't think it'll take too long to get through everything here. But we'll start off with a DVD, and this is called Inside Thin Lizzy, 1971 to 1983. And this is something that's not been endorsed in any way by Thin Lizzy, the record company that own the music and all that. It's kind of a bit unofficial release and that kind of thing. It's basically a bunch of journalists talking about Thin Lizzy's history and then going through their albums, in chronological order and ranking them out of 5 stars and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's pretty decent. It's not amazing or anything like that, but if you find the cheap copy, you're interested in Thin Lizzy, kind of do recommend giving this a go. So we'll move on to some 45s now. I don't have many of these, just 3, so this won't take too long. First one we'll be showing is this. This is Whiskey in the Jar with Black Boys on the Corner. I believe this is their second 45, probably their first hit, really, their first big hit record. Did pretty well. I think it got to #1 in Ireland, and it did quite well in the UK as well. And I believe their first 45 was only ever released in Ireland, and that's I believe it's called The Farm or something like that, and that's particularly rare. That's something that's it's many Thin Lizzy fans grail. But this is the one that came after. It's much more easier to get your hands on. I don't think I'll ever get a copy of their first release, but this is pretty good. And what I was saying before about Eric Bell's guitar playing, yeah, listen to Whiskey in the Jar and you kind of get exactly an idea of what I mean by that. That's like, epitomises what I'm talking about, really. So we'll move on now to this. This is a later 45 on the Vertigo label. It's from 1979. Do Anything You Want To on one side, and Just the Two of Us on the other. And I get the feeling at this point that Thin Lizzy they were still a pretty good band, in the later 70s, but they were kind of past their best, perhaps. But they were still a band that was worth sticking with, because with Phil's songwriting and everything like that, he's always going to come up with some decent material here and there. So we'll move on now to the final one, and it's a picture sleeve from the same sort of era, 1979, I believe this is from. Waiting for an Alibi, and yeah, it's the same record as before, same label and everything. And one of the things with this, which is pretty good, is it's got an extra. It's got like this little comic strip inside. And as soon as I saw this, the record came with this. I was like, yeah, this is definitely coming home with me. It's pretty cool addition. And it's nice to get something just kind of completely random. Wasn't expecting or anything like that. So yeah, that was a pretty nice thing. So that's the 45s. We'll move on now to the LPs. And we'll start off with this. This is their first album, Selftitled, and this is not an original. This is a modern reissue. I did try for quite a long time to get an original copy of this, but just wasn't really happening. Unfortunately, I was having very little luck with it. In fact, I don't think I ever once found a single original press of this album, or indeed the second album either. So both are pretty hard to find, in all honesty. And I kind of gave up in the end. And then last year, I was in HMV, and I noticed that they were selling the first 3 Thin Lizzy, studio albums at a reduced price. So So I thought, what the hell, I'll pick them up. You know, it doesn't look like I'm going to get any joy out of the originals, so yeah, I'll get these reissues. And yeah, so over the course of like 3 weeks or so, I, you know, after work, I popped into HMV and I picked up these reissues. So this is the first one. I'll show the label. All the labels are the same, so I'll just show this one. And very nice reissues. These come in polyline sleeves, as you can see. The pressing quality is fantastic. It's got a download code. The covers are actually very nice reproductions of, you know, the original. So, you know, it's a very good reissue. I'm very happy with them. And yeah, I really love this cover as well. It's a fantastic cover, and I really like the music. You know, generally this is a bit of a favourite of mine. I've got a real soft spot for this album. The cover's just great, and the music. I think it's not one of the highly regarded albums, you know, in general. It's not even highly regarded amongst Thin Lizzy fans. But I think mainly because it doesn't really sound that much like a Thin Lizzy album. You know, it's the early days when they were still finding their feet really. So it doesn't sound like what you'd expect, you know, from Thin Lizzy. It's actually quite a gentle album. That's kind of maybe what I like about it. But it's there's something about it really, and there's the cover as well. You know, saying I like the cover. It's kind of, well, I don't necessarily know why I like it so much. It's kind of like, you know, if you go into an art gallery and there's thousands of paintings all over the walls, and you're just drawn to a particular piece of art. You don't necessarily know why you're drawn to it more than, say, anything else. It's kind of like that. I just really like the cover and the back and everything. So yeah, good album. Definitely like the debut, and I'm always interested in artists and groups' early stuff for some reason. I always want to hear what they came up with. That's like, you know, want to hear where they kind of come from, where they started out, even though it may not be the best material that they ever put out. I'm always drawn to early period, you know, era, and kind of when I've got that covered, I kind of feel like I can move on to later stuff and that sort of thing. And I generally want to hear the early stuff. That's where I'm kind of drawn to almost the most out of anything really, even more so than the good stuff, you know, the better stuff that they put out, you know, whichever group it may be. But anyway, this is their second album, Shades of a Blue, Orphanage. And yeah, again, it's the same. As I was saying, I picked up all 3 of the first albums from HMVs, and again, a new press, same deal as the other one. You know, good quality throughout really. And this is a good album. Again, a good follow up. I don't think it's as strong as the first album, and also as well, I've noticed that I don't think this recording is quite as good. You know, the recording process in this album was as good as the first album. It sounds a bit flat throughout really. And it sounds a bit muddy, very muddy in places. You know, I think it's more to do with the recording than the pressing. I might be wrong on that, but I think that's the case. But still worth picking up. Still a good album. I really do like again, talking about the cover again. I really do like the gatefold. And this is Thin Lizzy in a park in Dublin, you know, in Ireland, in January, and I just think it's great. So that's Shades of a Blue, Orphanage, the second album. Move on now to the third, and this is Vagabonds of the Western World. Again, you know, great cover. Really think this, you know, Thin Lizzy's one of the things that people don't really talk about with Thin Lizzy is the cover design. I know they don't necessarily have a great deal of input on the cover design. You know, it's mostly done by artists and photographers and that kind of thing. But this is just fantastic cover, and the back's pretty good as well with the clover. And this is again from HMV. It's around the price I was paying. I think I paid a little bit more for the first one for some reason. It was a little bit more expensive. I'm not sure why, but it's HMV for you. So yeah, it was a little bit. But that's, you know, a decent price. I think you know, the prices I've seen on eBay for these records. You know, when they do pop up, which isn't very often, even on eBay. You know, particularly the first 2. Much higher than that. So yeah, this was a bit of a compromise in the end, and yeah, nice reissue, and a pretty good record. This one's a bit patchy, I find. You know, some of it's pretty good, some of it's just a bit sort of average really, but overall it's a good album. It's kind of like the stepping stone really, and it's a transitional step to you know, with the way Thin Lizzy started out, the sound, which is a bit more gentle, a bit more maybe a bit more acoustic, a bit more folky, I suppose, to a more sort of rock, you know, heavy rock band. You got something like the rocker on here, which is, that's very much the blueprint of where they were heading at this point, where the direction they were going in. So yeah, this is a good record as well. Same labels and everything, download code, and very happy with it. And that was the final one that I picked up with that deal that HMV had at the time. And it even comes with this. This is, I'm not sure if this was like an inner sleeve, or it's just a sheet that was included in the original. But they've included it as well in this one, and it looks the same. It's got the same sort of poor quality printing and that kind of thing from the early 70s. I have actually found a copy, I think I've had a couple of copies, maybe one, maybe two, in my time of Vagabonds of the Western World, an original UK copy, unlike the first two. Maybe I should have picked one of them up, because I don't think it was that expensive, but it was a bit rough. It was a bit of a rough shape, or I passed on, maybe that was a mistake, but I got this nice reissue, so it kind of makes up for it. So yeah, they're the first three records I got of their back catalogue, and I kind of recommend checking them out. If you're curious, maybe don't go in thinking that they're going to be the best of Thin Lizzy, but there's something a bit different about them, and they do have that sort of slightly folkier edge to them, more gentler edge to them. I'd say they're worth checking out if you're curious enough, and I think they're more for the fans necessarily. They're a bit more of deep cuts and that sort of thing. So I'll move on now to something that's the opposite of a deep cut, really. I've missed a few records out here. Definitely got gaps, in my Thin Lizzy collection. But this is Jailbreak. This is really their standout album, arguably their best ever album. It's one of the better albums to kind of come out at this sort of time. And yeah, it's a real classic. There's barely a bad sort of track on this. In fact, there isn't a bad track on this. It's super consistent, and it's really the jewel in Thin Lizzy's sort of career, really, this album. It's got The Boys Are Back in Town, which is one of their most famous tracks and that sort of thing. And this is on it's a different pressing than the other ones. This is a Universal Back to Black reissue. And apparently I did some research on this, and apparently it's regarded as one of the worst vinyl pressings you can get of this album, because the mastering they used is apparently really flat and just not great. There's much better versions. The original apparently is much better than this, and there's been many reissues of this in time that are better than this. So yeah, I don't necessarily recommend this version of this album, but I do recommend this album in terms of its music. And this is the label he went with. He sort of reproduced the original sort of Vertigo label, 180 gram and everything. Nice pressing, but it's the mastering's, it is a bit flat and not great, really. I can kind of see what they mean, but it's kind of good enough. I'm not going to be trying to get another copy. And again, great cover. I really do love the cover on this album. The die cut on it and the sleeve inside. It's just fantastic. I really do love Thin Lizzy covers generally. Of this, particularly of the 70s. They just seem to be pretty damn good. So we'll move on now to the final thing I'm going to be showing. It's a live album, Live and Dangerous, and this is the only, I believe, original LP that I've actually got of Thin Lizzy. And this is, back in the 70s, later 70s, and this is a must-have, really, Thin Lizzy album. Even though there's a lot of debate about how live this album is and everything, it's sort of notorious for, it's sort of the fact that it was, arguably recorded mostly in a studio rather than live on stage and that sort of thing. But it's still a great album. Most people, just are willing to look past that because it's so good. It was Thin Lizzy kind of, doing their best songs, when they were kind of in their peak and that kind of thing. So yeah, apparently this was recorded, and then 18 months later it came out, which is quite a long time, really, for a live album. It kind of maybe does indicate that perhaps there was some, shenanigans going on, with the recording in the studio, overdubbing stuff and that kind of thing. And Tony Visconti has said, a lot of it's overdubbed and all that kind of thing. So, but anyway, it's still very good, and it's still a classic album, and it's regarded as one of the best things Thin Lizzy ever did. So yeah, it's definitely worth talking about. It's the label, same as the You know, they're on the Vertigo label at this time, same as Jailbreak. I think it's the most famous, label. You know, it's the most defining label of Thin Lizzy, really. It's the Vertigo, and this is the inner sleeves. There's a double, and yeah, it comes with these nice inner sleeves. And it's actually a very nice copy of this album, in a nice shape. Pretty easy album to find. It was very popular. It sold very well. It was one of their hit records, really. I think it may well be the most profitable thing they put out. You know, amongst the likes of Jailbreak, and I believe Bad Reputation was very successful as well. That's another, it's a record I could do with tracking down, maybe, and that sort of thing. So there's a lot. I'm interested in Bad Reputation, and Fighting is another one I've got my eye on, and I hear kind of good things about. There's some things on there, Nightlife. I'm kind of interested in checking out as well. Some good stuff on there apparently, and yeah, there's quite a few to track down, and I probably will, given time, track them down whenever I find them. So that's it for my Thin Lizzy collection. Hopefully you've enjoyed taking a look at what I've got, and yeah, I might make a follow-up, as I said, one day with some new acquisitions and that sort of thing. So thanks for watching, everyone, and goodbye.